She could hear the audience through the walls. 2,000 people, all of them waiting, talking in low voices, flipping through their programs, checking their phones one last time before the lights went down, and here she was, sitting in a tiny room backstage, trying to remember how to breathe. Her name was Mei Lin, and she was 24 years old. Tonight, she was supposed to walk onto the stage of Carnegie Hall and perform one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, no? 2, the kind of piece that separates good pianists from great ones. But there was something the audience did not know. Something that made tonight different from any other performance in the history of this competition. 18 months ago, doctors told Mei Lin that she would probably never play piano again. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand what this night meant, you need to understand where this young woman came from. Mei Lin was born in a small town about 2 hours outside of Boston. Her parents had immigrated from Taiwan before she was born. Her father worked at a dry cleaning shop, pressing shirts and suits for people who never looked him in the eye. Her mother worked at a nail salon, breathing in chemicals for 10 hours a day so that other women could have pretty fingers. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a grocery store. The floors creaked. The windows did not close all the way. In winter, you could see your breath in the living room if the heat went out, which it often did. But none of that mattered to Mei Lin, because in the corner of that small living room sat something magical. An old upright piano that her grandmother had shipped over from Taiwan when she passed away. It was out of tune, and one of the keys was chipped. But to a 5-year-old girl, it was a doorway to another world. The first time Mei Lin touched those keys, something woke up inside her. She did not know any songs. She did not know what the notes were called. But her fingers seemed to know exactly where to go. She would sit at that piano for hours, making up melodies, lost in a world that only she could hear. Her mother noticed first. She would stand in the kitchen doorway watching her daughter play, and tears would roll down her cheeks. She knew. Somehow she knew that her little girl had been given something rare. Finding a piano teacher was not easy. Lessons were expensive, and money was always tight. But Mei Lin's mother did what mothers do. She made it work. She took extra shifts at the salon. She skipped meals so her daughter could have lessons. Twice a week instead of once. The teacher's name was Mr. Howard. He was 73 years old, had bushy white eyebrows, and had once performed with some of the greatest orchestras in the world. Now he lived alone in a small house with a cat named Beethoven and a grand piano that took up most of his living room. When he first heard Mei Lin play, he sat very still for a long time. Then he took off his glasses, wiped them with his shirt, and put them back on. Like he needed to make sure he was seeing clearly. He asked 7, she said. He nodded slowly. I have been teaching piano for 45 years. I have had hundreds of students. Maybe 3 or 4 of them had real talent. The kind you cannot teach. He paused. You are number 5. From that day forward, Mei Lin's life was piano. Before school, after school, weekends, holidays, while other kids were playing video games or hanging out at the mall, she was practicing scales and arpeggios until her fingers ached. Some people might think that sounds sad, but it was not. Not to Mei Lin, playing piano was not work for her. It was breathing. It was the place where she felt most like herself. By the time she was 12, she was winning competitions. By 15, she was being written about in music magazines. At 18, she received a full scholarship to one of the best conservatories in the country. Everyone said the same thing. This girl was going places. This girl was going to be a star. Her parents would sit in the audience at her concerts, holding hands, crying happy tears. All those years of sacrifice, all those extra shifts and skipped meals, it was all worth it. And then came the night that changed everything. Mei Lin was 22. She had just finished a rehearsal at her school and was driving home. It was late, almost midnight. The roads were wet from an earlier rain, and the streetlights made everything look orange and blurry. She was only 3 blocks from her apartment when she saw the headlights coming toward her. Wrong lane? Moving fast. Too fast. She did not even have time to scream. The other driver was drunk. He walked away from the accident with a few scratches. Maylin was not so lucky. When she woke up in the hospital, the first thing she saw was her mother's face. Her father was standing behind her, his hand on her shoulder. They both looked like they had not slept in days. "What happened?" Maylin asked. Her voice came out like a whisper. Her mother tried to smile, but her lips were trembling. "You were in an accident, sweetheart, but you are okay. You are going to be okay." Maylin tried to move her left hand. It did not respond the way it should. There was pain, yes, but also something else. A numbness. A heaviness. Like her hand belonged to someone else. The doctors came later that day. They explained everything in careful, measured words. The crash had caused nerve damage in her left hand. They had done surgery to repair what they could, but there were limits. "Will I be able to play piano again?" Maylin asked. The doctor looked at her parents, then back at her. "You will regain function. You will be able to use your hand for most daily activities. But as for playing at a professional level," he paused, "I think you should prepare yourself for the possibility that it may not be realistic anymore." That night, after everyone had left, Maylin stared at the ceiling and felt something break inside her. Not her body. Her body was already broken. This was something deeper. Something that had no name. Piano was not just what she did. It was who she was. Without it, she did not know how to be herself. For months after the accident, she did not touch a piano. She went through physical therapy. She did her exercises. She smiled when people told her she was lucky to be alive. But inside, she felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out the most important part of her and left nothing behind. Her mother never pushed her to play. But sometimes, late at night, Maylin would catch her sitting by the old upright piano in the living room, running her fingers over the keys without pressing them down, just touching them, remembering, and now here she was. 18 months later, backstage at Carnegie Hall, in just a few minutes, she would walk onto that stage. She would sit down at a piano worth more than everything her parents had ever owned, and she would try to do the impossible. In the front row of the audience, her mother and father sat holding hands. They had flown in from Boston that morning. Her mother was wearing a dress she had bought at a secondhand store and altered herself. Her father was wearing the only suit he owned, the one he wore to weddings and funerals. They did not know if their daughter's hand would hold up. They did not know if the nerves that had been damaged in that crash would cooperate when it mattered most. Nobody knew. Not even Maylin. She looked down at her left hand and flexed, her fingers slowly. One by one. There was still some stiffness, still some pain. But they moved. The stage manager knocked on her door. 5 minutes. Maylin stood up. She looked at herself in the mirror. She took a deep breath. Some dreams are worth risking everything for. Even if your heart might break all over again. She opened the door and walked toward the stage. The first few weeks after Maylin came home from the hospital were the hardest of her life. Her apartment felt different now. Smaller, somehow. The piano in the corner, a beautiful black upright she had saved for years to buy, sat there like a ghost. She could not bring herself to look at it. Some days she would throw a blanket over it just so she did not have to see it. Physical therapy started almost immediately. 3 times a week she would take the bus to a clinic downtown and spend an hour doing exercises that felt pointless. Squeezing a rubber ball, stretching her fingers against resistance bands, picking up small objects and putting them down again. The therapist was a nice woman with short gray hair and a calm voice. She always said encouraging things. "You are making progress. This is normal. Give it time." But Maylin knew the truth. She could feel it every time she tried to move her fingers. The left hand was slower now, weaker. There was a delay between what her brain told it to do and what it actually did. Like a bad internet connection. Like trying to run through water at night, she would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. Sleep came hard, and when it did, she dreamed of playing piano. In her dreams, her hands worked perfectly. The music flowed out of her like it always had. And then she would wake up, and the silence would hit her like a punch to the chest. Her friends tried to help. They called. They texted. They showed up with food and flowers and awkward smiles. But after a while, the calls became less frequent. The visits stopped. People have their own lives. They cannot carry your sadness forever, Maylin understood. She did not blame them, but the loneliness was heavy. Some days it felt like she was drowning in it. Her mother called every single day, sometimes twice. She would talk about small things. The weather, what she had for lunch, a funny thing that happened at the salon. She never asked about piano. She never pushed. But at the end of every call, she would say the same thing.
I love you.
No matter what. Those 5 words kept Maylin going on the days when she wanted to give up. About 3 months after the accident, something happened that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Maylin was sitting on her couch watching television without really seeing it. There was a knock on her door. She was not expecting anyone, so she almost did not answer. I didn't. But the knocking continued. Patient, steady. Like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. She opened the door and found Mr. Howard standing there. He looked older than she remembered. His white hair was thinner, and he leaned on a wooden cane she had never seen before. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, kind, full of something that looked like hope. Double quotes. "Hello, Maylin," he said. "May I come in?" "What?" She stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, looking around her small apartment. His eyes landed on the piano in the corner, the one covered with a blanket. He did not say anything about it, not yet. Instead, he sat down in the chair by the window and looked at her. Really looked at her. It's the way he used to when she was a little girl, sitting at his piano, trying to get a difficult passage right. "I heard what happened," he said. "I wanted to come sooner, but I thought you might need time." Maylin sat down across from him. Time for what? To grieve. He said the word simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You lost something important that deserves to be mourned. Something cracked inside her, a wall she had built without realizing it. Her eyes, filled with tears, and for the first time since the accident, she let them fall. Mr. Howard did not try to comfort her with words, just sat there, quiet and steady, letting her cry. When she was done, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. She shook her head. He unfolded it. It was an old photograph, yellowed with age. A young man sat at a piano, his hands poised over the keys. He was smiling, but there was something sad in his eyes. "That is me," Mr. Howard said, 52 years ago. I was 21. Years old, and I had just been told that my career was over. Maylin looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He held up his right hand. For the first time, she noticed the scars, thin white lines running across his palm and fingers. "I was in a fire," he said. "My apartment building. I got out, but not before the flames caught my hand. The doctor said I would never play professionally again. Too much damage, too much scar tissue." Maylin stared at him. In all the years she had known him, he had never told her this story. "But you did play again," she said. "You performed all over the world. I have seen the recordings." Mr. Howard smiled. It was a sad smile, but there was strength in it too. "It took me 3 years," he said. 3 years of work, 3 years of pain. 3 years of people telling me to give up and find something else to do with my life." He paused, but I did not listen, because I knew something they did not. "What?" He leaned forward. "Music does not live in your hands, Maylin. It lives in your soul. Your hands are just the tools, and tools can be rebuilt." That afternoon, Mr. Howard made Maylin a promise. He would come to her apartment 3 times a week. They would start from the very beginning, not with concertos or sonatas, with the simplest exercises, the most basic movements. They would rebuild her technique 1 note at a time. "It will be hard," he warned her. "There will be days when you want to quit, days when you feel like you are going backward instead of forward. But if you trust me, and if you trust yourself, we will get there." Maylin looked at the blanket covering her piano. Then she looked back at Mr. Howard. "Okay," she said. "Let us start." The next few months were exactly as hard as he had promised. Harder, even. Some days, her hand would cramp up after just 10 minutes of practice. The pain was sharp, like tiny needles under her skin. Other days, her fingers would simply refuse to cooperate. She would tell them to play a C and they would hit a D instead. Over and over again. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep. Nights when she stared at the piano and hated it. Hated what it represented. Hated how far she had fallen from where she used to be. But she kept going, day after day. Week after week. Mr. Howard was patient in a way that seemed almost impossible. He never raised his voice, never showed frustration. When she made mistakes, he would simply nod and say, "Again." When she got something right, he would smile and say, "Good. Now do it 10 more times." Slowly. So slowly that she almost did not notice it at first, things began to change. Her left hand started responding faster. The delay between thought and movement grew shorter. The pain became more manageable. It's not gone, but something she could work through. 6 months after Mr. Howard first knocked on her door, Maylin played through an entire piece without stopping. It was a simple piece, a Chopin nocturne she had learned when she was 12. Nothing fancy, it's nothing difficult. But when she finished, she looked up at Mr. Howard with tears in her eyes. "I did it," she whispered. He nodded. "Yes, you did." That night after he left, Maylin sat at her piano for a long time. She ran her fingers over the keys, feeling their familiar smoothness. And for the first time in over a year, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope she was not ready for Carnegie Hall, not even close. But she was playing again, and that was enough. For now, the months that followed were filled with small victories. First, Maylin made it through an entire practice session without her hand cramping up. Then, she learned to play a Mozart sonata, something she had performed dozens of times before the accident, but had to relearn from scratch. Then came a Beethoven piece, then another Chopin. Each one felt like climbing a mountain. Each time she reached the top, she could see another mountain waiting in the distance. Mr. Howard came to her apartment 3 times a week, just like he promised. Rain or shine. Hot summer days and cold winter mornings. He never missed a single session. Even when his own health started to decline, when his cane became a constant companion instead of an occasional one, he kept showing up. "Why do you do this?" Maylin asked him one afternoon. "You could be resting. You could be enjoying your retirement. Why spend so much time on me?" Mr. Howard thought about the question for a long moment. Then he said something that stayed with her forever. "'Cause 50 years ago, someone did the same thing for me. An old teacher who refused to let me give up, made a promise to myself back then. If I ever had the chance to pass that gift along, I would." He looked at her with those kind, sharp eyes. "You are that chance, Maylin, and I am not going to waste it." About a year after the accident, Mr. Howard brought up something that made Maylin's heart stop. "There is a competition," he said casually, like he was talking about the weather. "The Young Artists' Piano Competition is being held at Carnegie Hall in 6 months. I think you should enter." Maylin almost laughed. "Carnegie Hall? Are you serious?" "Very serious. My hand is not ready." "What?" "I am not ready. I can barely get through a full concerto without making mistakes." Mr. Howard nodded. "That is true. You are not ready yet. But you will be in 6 months, if you work hard enough." She shook her head. "I do not know. It feels too soon. What if I fail? What if I get up there and my hand gives out in front of everyone?" He leaned forward. "And what if you do not try at all? What if you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you had been brave enough to take the chance?" Maylin did not answer. She did not have to. They both knew he was right. That night she called her mother and told her about the competition. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment. "Carnegie Hall," her mother finally said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, the same Carnegie Hall where you always dreamed of playing." "Yes, Mom." Another long silence. Then her mother started to cry, not sad tears, happy ones. The kind that come when something you thought was lost forever suddenly comes back. "I will be there," her mother said. "Your father and I will be in the front row. No matter what happens, we will be there." The next 6 months were the hardest of Maylin's life. It's harder than the physical therapy. It's harder than those dark days when she could not even look at her piano. She practiced 8 hours a day, sometimes 10. She learned the Rachmaninoff concerto note by note, measure by measure. It was one of the most difficult pieces in the entire piano repertoire. It's a kind of piece that could break even healthy hands. There were setbacks. Of course there were. Some days her left hand refused to cooperate. Some days the pain came back so strong she had to stop and put ice on her fingers. Some days she sat at the piano and cried because she could hear in her head exactly how the music should sound, but her hands could not make it happen. But she did not quit, not once. Mr. Howard pushed her harder than he ever had before. He demanded perfection on passages she had already played 100 times. He made her practice the same 4 measures over and over until they were flawless. He never accepted good enough. Good enough does not win competitions, he said. Good enough does not move people to tears. You are capable of greatness, Maylin. Do not settle for less. The night before she left for New York, Mr. Howard came to her apartment one last time. He looked tired, older than she had ever seen him. But there was a light in his eyes that she recognized. Pride. I have something for you, he said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver pin in the shape of a treble clef. It was old and slightly tarnished, but beautiful in a way that only old things can be. This belonged to my teacher, he said. The one who saved my career all those years ago. She gave it to me before my first big performance after the accident. She told me it was lucky. He smiled. I do not really believe in luck, but I believe in symbols. And I want you to have this. Maylin took the pin with trembling hands. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. Just play your heart out tomorrow. That is all I ask. She hugged him then. This old man who had given her so much, who had refused to let her give up on herself, who had walked into her apartment on a random Tuesday afternoon and changed her life forever. Thank you, she whispered. For everything, he patted her back gently. Go show them who you are. And now here she was. Carnegie Hall, the biggest night of her life. The backstage area was crowded with other pianists. Young people from all over the world, all of them talented, all of them hungry. Maylin tried not to look at them, tried not to compare herself. But it was hard. She found a quiet corner and sat down. Her hands were shaking. Not from cold. From fear? What was she doing here? These other pianists had 2 healthy hands. They had been practicing their whole lives without interruption. They had not spent months in physical therapy, relearning how to move their fingers. She did not belong here. That was the thought that kept running through her mind. She did not belong here. Then she felt something in her pocket. The silver pin, Mr. Howard's gift. She took it out and held it in her palm. It was warm from being close to her body. She thought about the teacher who had given it to Mr. Howard all those years ago. She thought about Mr. Howard giving it to her. A chain of hope stretching back through the decades. She pinned it to the inside of her dress, close to her heart where no one could see it. A stagehand appeared. Miss Chen, you are up in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 300 seconds. That was all the time she had left before everything changed. She stood up. Her legs felt weak. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She thought about her parents, sitting in the front row. Her mother in her second-hand dress. Her father in his only suit. They had given up so much for her. So many years. So many sacrifices. She thought about Mr. Howard, probably sitting at home right now. Too frail to make the trip, but watching the live stream on his computer. She thought about the little girl she used to be. The one who sat down at her grandmother's old piano and discovered that her fingers could make magic. She was still that girl. Despite everything, despite the accident and the pain and the months of darkness, that girl was still inside her. The stagehand led her down a long hallway. She could hear the murmur of the audience getting louder. 2,000 people, waiting. Then she was there, standing in the wings, looking out at the stage. The piano sat in the center, gleaming under the lights. A 9-foot Steinway grand, the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Our next performer is Maylin Chen, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto. No, 2 applause. polite, expectant applause. Mei Lin took a deep breath, then another, and she walked onto the stage. The walk from the wings to the piano felt like the longest walk of her life. It was maybe 30 feet. 30 feet of polished wooden stage, gleaming under lights that were so bright they made everything look slightly unreal, like a dream or a nightmare. She was not sure which one yet. Mei Lin could feel 2,000 pairs of eyes on her, watching, judging, waiting to see what she would do. Her heels clicked against the floor with each step. The sound echoed through the silent hall. Click, click, click. She kept her eyes on the piano, that beautiful black Steinway, sitting there like an old friend. Or maybe an old enemy. Tonight, she would find out which one it truly was. When she reached the bench, she stopped. She turned to face the audience and gave a small bow. It was what you were supposed to do. What every pianist did before a performance, but her body felt stiff, mechanical, like she was a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings. The applause died down. Silence filled the hall. The kind of silence that feels heavy. The kind that presses against your ears and makes your heartbeat sound like thunder. Mei Lin sat down on the bench. She adjusted her dress. She placed her feet on the pedals. She looked at the keys stretching out in front of her. 88 of them. Black and white. Simple and complicated at the same time. Behind her, the orchestra waited. Dozens of musicians with their instruments ready. The conductor stood at his podium, baton raised, watching her, waiting for her signal that she was ready to begin, but she was not ready, not even close. Her hands were trembling. She could see them shaking as she raised them toward the keys. Her left hand, the one that had been through so much, felt heavy and foreign, like it belonged to someone else. What if it failed her? What if she got halfway through the piece and her fingers just stopped working? What if she made a fool of herself in front of all these people? She thought about all the other pianists backstage, the ones with healthy hands and unbroken dreams. They were probably watching on the monitors right now, waiting for her to fail, waiting to see the girl with the damaged hand crash and burn. Her vision started to blur. Tears were building up behind her eyes. No, not now. She could not cry now. Not in front of everyone. She looked out at the audience. It was hard to see individual faces because of the lights, but she knew exactly where her parents were sitting. Front row, just left of center. She had memorized the seat numbers, and then somehow she found them. Her mother's face. Her father's face. They were both leaning forward slightly, their eyes fixed on her. Her mother's hands were clasped together, as tightly her knuckles had turned white. They were not looking at her with expectation. They were not looking at her with pressure. They were looking at her with love. Pure, unconditional love. The kind that does not care about winning or losing. The kind that just wants you to be okay in that moment. Something shifted inside Mei Lin. She was not here to prove anything to the judges. She was not here to beat the other pianists. She was not even here to prove the doctors wrong. She was here because music was her life. Because the piano had saved her when nothing else could. Because somewhere inside her, there was still a little girl who sat down at her grandmother's old upright and discovered that her fingers create magic. She took a deep breath, then another. She felt the silver pin pressing against her chest, close to her heart. She nodded to the conductor. He raised his baton, and then her fingers touched the keys. The first chord rang out through the hall, deep and rich and full of something that words could not describe. It was not just sound. It was feeling, emotion, everything she had been through in the past 18 months, compressed into a single moment of music. And then something amazing happened. The fear disappeared. Not slowly, not gradually. It just vanished, like someone had flipped a switch inside her head. 1 second, she was terrified. The next second, she was free. Her fingers moved across the keys like they had a mind of their own. They knew where to go. They knew what to do. All those months of practice, all those hours of pain and frustration and tears, had prepared them for this exact moment. The orchestra swelled behind her, joining her melody with waves of sound. Violins and cellos and horns all weaving together into something beautiful. But Mei Lin barely heard them. She was somewhere else now. Somewhere deep inside the music where nothing else existed. She was 7 years old again, sitting at her grandmother's piano, making up songs that nobody had ever heard before. She was 12, performing at her first competition, so nervous she thought she might faint. She was 18, receiving her scholarship letter, crying tears of joy while her mother held her. She was in the hospital, staring at her damaged hand, wondering if she would ever play again. She was in her apartment, throwing a blanket over her piano because she could not bear to look at it. She was sitting with Mr. Howard, listening to him tell her that music lives in the soul, not the hands. All of it was there. All of it was part of the music. The Rachmaninoff concerto was long. Over 30 minutes of some of the most demanding music ever written for piano. There were passages that required lightning-fast fingers. There were sections that needed the softest, most delicate touch. There were moments of thundering power and moments of heartbreaking tenderness. Maylin played through all of it. Her left hand did not fail her. Not once. There were moments when she could feel it straining, moments when the old pain flickered at the edges of her awareness. But she pushed through. She let the music carry her past the pain, past the fear, past everything that had tried to stop her from being here tonight. Somewhere in the middle of the second movement, the slow and beautiful part, she felt tears running down her cheeks. She did not try to stop them. She did not even wipe them away. She just let them fall while her fingers kept moving, kept creating, kept speaking the language that only music could speak. In the audience, her mother was crying too. Her father had his arm around her, and there were tears in his eyes as well. Strangers sitting nearby were reaching for tissues. Something was happening in that hall. Something that went beyond a simple piano competition. The third movement came. Fast and fierce and demanding. Maylin's fingers flew across the keys. The orchestra raced to keep up with her. The music built and built, climbing higher and higher toward something magnificent. And then, finally, the ending. The last chord. The final notes. Everything she had been building toward for 18 months, for her entire life. Coming together in one perfect moment, her hands came down on the keys one last time. The sound rang out through the hall. Big and bold and beautiful, and then silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The whole world seemed to stop. Maylin sat at the piano with her hands still on the keys. Her chest was heaving. Her face was wet with tears. Her left hand was aching in a way she knew she would feel for days. But she had done it. She had actually done it. She had played Rachmaninoff at Carnegie Hall, the piece that was supposed to be impossible for her. The dream that doctors said she should give up on. She had done it, and then the silence broke. It started with one person clapping, then another, then 10 more, then 100. Then 2,000 people were on their feet, applauding so loudly that the sound was like a physical force, like a wave crashing over her. A standing ovation. Before the judges had even given their scores, before anyone knew who had won or lost, 2,000 strangers, standing up for a girl they had never met. Standing up for the music she had made. Standing up for the story they somehow knew without being told. Maylin stayed at the piano for a long moment. She looked at her hands. These scarred and perfect, beautiful hands that had refused to give up. Then she looked up at the audience. At her parents in the front row, both of them on their feet, both of them crying. Both of them clapping so hard their hands must have hurt, and she smiled. For the first time in 18 months, she truly smiled. The applause seemed to go on forever. Lynn stood up from the piano bench on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. She bowed once, twice, 3 times. But still, the clapping continued. Still, the audience stayed on their feet. She did not know what to do. This was not something she had prepared for. In all her hours of practice, all her mental rehearsals of this night, she had never imagined this. She had imagined polite applause. She had imagined getting through the piece without falling apart. She had imagined surviving. She had not imagined 2,000 people refusing to sit down. Finally, she walked off the stage. Her legs carried her somehow, even though she could not feel them. The moment she stepped into the wings, out of sight of the audience, Her knees buckled. A stagehand caught her arm and helped her stay upright. "That was incredible," he said. His eyes were wide. "I have worked here for 15 years. I have never seen anything like that." Mei Lin could not speak. She just nodded and let him guide her to a chair backstage. She sat down and put her head in her hands. Her whole body was shaking now. Not from fear this time. From something else. Relief, exhaustion, joy. All of it mixed together into something she could not name. She did not know how long she sat there. Minutes, maybe. Or maybe hours. Time had stopped making sense. Then she heard footsteps. Running footsteps. And a voice she would recognize anywhere in the world. Mei Lin. She looked up just in time to see her mother rushing toward her. Her father was right behind, moving as fast as his bad knee would allow. Her mother crashed into her with a hug so tight it almost hurt. She was crying. Sobbing, really. Her whole body shaking with the force of it. "My baby," she kept saying. "My baby girl. You did it. You did it." Her father wrapped his arms around both of them. He was crying too. This man who never cried, who had worked his whole life without complaint, who had never once asked for anything in return. Tears were streaming down his weathered face. They stayed like that for a long time. The three of them, holding each other in that cramped backstage hallway, not saying anything, not needing to. Finally, Mei Lin pulled back. She looked at her parents, at their tear-streaked faces and their proud, shining eyes. "I could hear you," she said. "When I was playing, somehow I could hear you cheering for me. I know that does not make sense, but I could." Her mother laughed through her tears. "We were cheering so loud. I think the people next to us wanted us to be quiet." "I do not care," her father said. It might have been the first time Mei Lin ever heard him say those words. "Let them complain. My daughter just played Carnegie Hall. I will cheer as loud as I want." The next few hours passed in a blur. There were more performances after hers. Other pianists taking the stage, playing their own pieces, trying to capture some of the magic that still hung in the air. Mei Lin watched from backstage, but she barely heard the music. She was still floating somewhere outside her body, still trying to understand what had just happened. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The results: all the competitors were brought onto the stage. They stood in a line facing the audience. While the head judge walked to the microphone with an envelope in his hand, Mei Lin's heart was pounding again. She had done her best. She knew that. Whatever happened now was out of her control. The judge opened the envelope. He smiled at the audience. "In third place," he said, with a truly magnificent performance of Liszt's Piano Sonata in B minor. He announced a name. "A young man from Germany." The audience applauded as he stepped forward to receive his medal. In second place, the judge continued. "With a performance that moved us all to tears, a performance that reminded us why we love music in the first place." Mei Lin held her breath. Mei Lin Chen. For a moment she did not move. Second place? Not first. Second. She waited for the disappointment to hit. The feeling of failure. The sense that all her hard work had not been enough, but it did not come. Instead, she felt something unexpected. Peace. A quiet, deep sense of peace that started in her chest and spread through her whole body. She stepped forward and accepted her medal. The audience was cheering again. Maybe not as loud as before, but still cheering. Still on their feet, she looked out at them and smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes from somewhere deep inside. Second place at Carnegie Hall, 18 months after being told she would never play professionally again. Second place against the best young pianists in the entire world. That was not failure. That was a miracle. The first place winner was announced. A young woman from South Korea who had played a flawless performance of a Prokofiev concerto. She was brilliant. She deserved to win. Mei Lin clapped for her along with everyone else. After the ceremony, the journalists came. They always did after big competitions. But this time, they were not interested in the first place winner. They wanted to talk to the girl who came in second. "Miss Chen," one of them asked, microphone extended toward her face. Can you tell us about your journey? We understand you were in a serious accident. The doctors said you would never play again. How does it feel to prove them wrong? Mei Lin thought about the question for a long moment. How does it feel? How do you put something like that into words? I did not come here to prove anyone wrong, she finally said. I came here to prove something to myself. I came here to find out if the music was still inside me. And it is, she paused. It never left. Even when I thought I had lost it forever, it was always there, waiting for me to find my way back. The journalist nodded, scribbling notes. And what is next for you? Will you continue to compete? Mei Lin smiled. I do not know what is next. But I know this. I am going to keep playing. For as long as my hands will let me, maybe longer. That night, after all the interviews were done and the crowds had gone home, Mei Lin sat in her hotel room with her parents. They had ordered room service. Nothing fancy. Just sandwiches and tea. But it felt like a feast. Her phone buzzed. A video call. She looked at the screen and her heart swelled. Mr. Howard's face appeared. He was sitting in his living room, the familiar piano visible behind him. His eyes were red like he had been crying. I watched the whole thing, he said. His voice was thick with emotion. Every single note. You were magnificent, Mei Lin. Absolutely magnificent. I could not have done it without you, she said. You saved me. When I wanted to give up, you would not let me. He shook his head. No, you saved yourself. I just reminded you who you were. They talked for a long time. About the performance. About the judges' comments. About what the future might hold. But mostly they just sat in comfortable silence. Two musicians connected by something deeper than words. Before he hung up, Mr. Howard said one last thing. You know, I told you that pin was lucky? I do not really believe in luck. But maybe I was wrong, he smiled. Or maybe the luck is not in the pin. Maybe it is in the people who wear it. People who refuse to give up. People who keep going even when everything tells them to stop. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. A video of Mei Lin's performance went viral. Someone in the audience had recorded it on their phone and posted it online. Within days, it had been viewed by millions of people around the world. The comment section was filled with messages from strangers. A man in Brazil who was learning to walk again after a car accident said the video gave him hope. A teenage girl in Japan who had been told she was not good enough for music school, said she, was going to keep trying. A retired teacher in England said she cried for an hour. After watching it, Mei Lin read every single comment, every story, every message from people she had never met, telling her that her music had touched them in ways she could not have imagined. She had not won first place. She had not beaten everyone else. But she had done something that no trophy could measure. She had reminded people that broken things can be made whole again, that the worst moment of your life does not have to be the end of your story, that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the deepest pain. A year later, Mei Lin performed again at Carnegie Hall, this time not as a competitor. As a headliner, her name was on the marquee outside the building. Her face was on posters all over the city. But before she walked onto the stage that night, she did the same thing she had done before. She touched the silver pin on the inside of her dress. She thought about Mr. Howard, who was too sick to travel now, but would be watching from home. She thought about her parents, sitting in the front row again, holding hands like they always did. And she thought about the little girl who had sat down at her grandmother's old piano so many years ago and discovered that her fingers could make magic. That little girl was still here. She had never left. Mei Lin took a deep breath. She walked onto the stage. The audience rose to greet her, and once again her fingers touched the keys. The music began, and it was beautiful.